Good evening, everyone. It's lovely to see a big crowd here this evening for this. It's, I think, going to be a really special event for Brain Awareness Week. So before I run through the running order for this evening, and before I do a little bit of housekeeping, first, I'll just point out that Brain Awareness Week, as you know, is a global campaign with the purpose of increasing public awareness of the importance of brain research and the progress that's being made in brain research and our understanding of the brain all the time. And we've already had some great events this week for Brain Awareness Week, and this event, I'm sure, will be no exception. Now, before I start, I'll just make a few housekeeping announcements. Firstly, this session is being recorded, but it's going to be recorded in speaker view. So as long as you keep your camera turned off and don't turn on your microphone, you won't appear if you don't want to appear in the recording. It might work best for everybody if you switch your view from gallery to speaker view, because that'll probably be the best way to enjoy the experience of this evening. Second point to make is that there will be a question and answer session at the end of the event this evening. So if you have questions that arise during the performances or during the talks, pop them into the chat at the bottom. And in that Q&A session, I'll be acting as the moderator. So I'll pose questions to our performers and our speakers and the various people on our panel for tonight. The event itself is going to have several different parts. It's going to be a combination of recorded presentations, recorded performances, and live talks and live performances as well. I'll go through the list of presenters and performers in a second, but the event is being brought to us with funding support from FENS, the Federation of European Neuroscience Societies, and in collaboration with the Department of Psychology at Maynooth, as well as support from the European Dana Alliance, the Neurological Alliance of Ireland, Neuroscience Ireland, the Tomber Group, and many others who are helping us tonight. So the event itself will consist, first of all, of a short talk and presentation by Dr. Svetlana Rudenko. So Svetlana is a concert pianist and synesthete, who's also a postdoctoral researcher in the Department of Electrical Engineering at TU Dublin. Following that, we'll have a presentation by Professor Fiona Newell. So Fiona is a professor of experimental psychology at Trinity College and probably the country's leading authority on synesthesia. Following that, we'll have a talk from Sophie Lee. So Sophie is just finishing a PhD in the study of the effectiveness of music interventions for people in the early stages of dementia. So she'll talk a little bit about music and brain and memory. And then finally, we'll have some videos of different performances from Svetlana, and then a Q&A session at the very end. So again, just to remind everyone, please mute your mics, turn off your cameras. We're going to switch to speaker view. And first, I'll hand over to Svetlana, who's going to give us a brief talk.
Thank you so much, Richard. Hello, everyone. So thank you for joining us. I'm going to share now my screen for my presentation. So, okay. So how we use synesthesia in research and in collaborations with artists and musicians. So Ramachandran and Hubbard said that synesthesia is a window into perception, language, and thought. So I will try not to focus too much on cognitive musicology, but show you practical endeavors and during the collaboration. So that I will start with the specific type of synesthesia. There's more than 80 types of registered types of sensory pairings. So musical space synesthesia. Here is a painting of Chinese artist synesthete Ning Song. And he painted exactly on the phrase of Chopin ballad. I'm going to play it. So it sounds like this. So Ninhui has hermesthesia. It means it's colors to pitch, and as well as musical space synesthesia, and he mapped it for American synesthesia meeting we had at Harvard University. So as well as synesthetes perceive pitch not only with colors but emotions, and so that, as you can see, that it's a pretty dramatic landscape. So I'm actually going to show you just a little bit of dramatic episode of Ballade Chopin. So as well as so by my research on symbolist composers instead Scriabin, there's performance analysis which Anatol Lekin did by recordings, and there's certain gravitational and desynchronization of musical texture layers. And according to that, so the conclusion is that so the composer as performer kept independent timelines, and as well as it, so we have evidence of quotations. So there was research by Israeli scientists Akiva Kabiri-Linkowski who recorded statistically that synesthetes perceive a linear diagonal organization of pitch tones. So here is the quotations from composers, Messiaen as well, synesthete composers. So certainly there is a link between visualization and musical texture and the perception. So particularly time perception as well. So at Trinity College Dublin, in collaboration with John Dingliana, the School of Computer Science and Statistics, we developed computational model of musical texture, visualization of musical texture and musical synesthesia, musical space synesthesia. So the layers of specific, so there's 3 layers, archetypes, where it has symbolic meanings, and so we programmed that so it gives an impression of the landscape, and that's exactly what is happening in perception of synesthetes, musical space synesthetes, when the layers of musical texture perceived independently. So I'm going to play now. Next slide, you can hear it. So okay, skipping. So I just need to adjust the microphone here. Okay, so Scriabin, a very interesting composer, and because he was synesthete, he tried to incorporate their sensory, his perception into his creative composition. So his ambition of life ambition was creating multisensory drama mysterium, which connects unity of senses. So the categories of his compositions, they don't fit into simple emotions such as sadness or joy or excitement. There's philosophical categories, and he tried to reflect in his music processes of consciousness and mind. So I'm in collaboration with Maura MacDonald, visual artist, the professor of, again, at Trinity College Dublin. So we created visualization of Sonata No. 5 with reflection on musical texture archetypes. So I will show you now that the process, how it was done, and just a little bit to say that, so there's debate still if Scriabin was pure synesthete, because he recognized only C, D, and F sharp colors. The rest of he figured out intellectually. So, but as I discussed before, it looks like he was musical space synesthete because of performance analysis by Anatol Leikin. So Scriabin inserted color organ into part Luce, into the score of Prometheus, poem of fire, and this is that the emotional categories wired to the tonalities and colors. So here that our approach was more McDonald. So we did analysis. I described the archetypes of musical texture. So there's present the divine summons, mystical chord, the archetypes of eternal feminine, the masculine principle, motif of light, and the motif of flight. So during the live concert, Timothy Leyden, artist synesthete, he painted on Scriabin sonata, and his impression was fitting into vertiginous dances, you can see there. So I actually, yes, and as well as synesthesia art we used for visualization, we used as well historical images reflecting on the symbolism of composer style, so that, for example, you will see in visualization later, there would be Jean Delville image designed for Prometheus score, or for example, a Rubel painting of Queen Swan, so which we used for eternal feminine as a symbol of eternal feminine. Yes, so here.
So that due to the lack of time, I will.
Sorry. No.
So here's the result.
Here, that's a and so I will ask now Claire that, so if you share that I stop sharing my screen probably, if you share the link for Scriabin Sonata number 5, so that you can see that the visualization synchronized with the music. Yeah. I'm coming back. So, yes, so there's other collaborations, and we presented at the British Neuroscience Association Festival, BNA, in 2019. So I wanted to show you that, yes, okay. You see that one of the theories of consciousness, so, is to consider brain as a predictive machine. So we generate best guesses according to our learned experiences. So I had so many collaborations when visual artists paint or design graphics on my performances. So I actually started backwards process now, the composing on art. And so it was very interesting collaboration with New Jersey Ramapa College with Jerry Harden and Anne Lepore, because when I composed on Jerry Harden textual art, correlative conjunctions, and but and not, just perceiving the characters in musical texture. So then on my music, she actually perceived as a chromastid. She perceived it differently. And the Anne Lepore, who was our animator, was between. So that whose animation I should develop. So here's that I show you. So now I'm going to talk about cross-modal associations. So if synesthesia occurs only from 2 to 4% of population, so then cross-modal associations we all experience, and particularly there's history in music, big history as first like comes to mind, program music like Berlioz Symphony Fantastique, or for example, if you remember nicknames for famous music compositions like piano, for example, Chopin, Raindrop Prelude in D flat major, or for example, Rachmaninoff Etude Tableau, Red Riding Hood, or the Moonlight Sonata, Beethoven, which Beethoven didn't give this nickname. So it was actually reviewer. So on the example of Ballade number 2, Chopin, I'm going to demonstrate to you and describe how subjectively my cross-modal associations appeared. So I just bring the screen here, so because I'm going to do some playing. And probably, yeah, I stop sharing now so that it's oh. Yeah, okay. So Chopin Ballade, the first theme, very lyrical, and my subjective associations, it's Christmas Eve. There is a child playing on the Christmas tree, and grandpa, and they telling each other stories, and it's a beautiful atmosphere there. So the second theme or archetype, it's a stormy theme, because maybe that again that we don't have evidence. It was influenced on Chopin as a composer. The political events what were occurring in 1795 when Poland had to sign the partition between Prussia, Austria, and Russia. So that I demonstrate this archetype. And after that, so there's a task for you that to see how your imagination will work, because now that so Claire going to share a recording of pre-recorded performance of Chopin Ballade No. 2, and you will recognize those archetypes, and just try to think in images and be responsive to your feelings and the sensory responses, and see that what experience it will bring to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Svetlana, and thank you, Claire, for your technical editing there. So that was fabulous. Really fantastic performances there. And remember, if you have questions for Svetlana, please pop them into the chat box at the end, and we'll revisit them in the Q&A towards the end of the event. So that was a great start to the event. Next, we have a talk from Professor Fiona Newell. So Fiona is a Professor of Experimental Psychology at Trinity and runs the Multisensory Cognition Research Group in TCIN. And Fiona is going to provide us with a video that will explain some of the background to the neural basis of synesthesia. So again, if you have questions, drop them into the chat and I'll pose them to Fiona or to Svetlana later at the Q&A part. Okay, so Claire, whenever you're ready, if you want to transfer over that video. Okay, so continuing our series of talks, the next talk is going to be from Sophie Lee. So Sophie, some of you may have seen her at last night's event. Sophie is currently finishing a PhD with the University of Limerick and in collaboration with Tallaght Hospital, looking at the effectiveness of music-based interventions for people in the early stages of Alzheimer's disease. This is work with Des O'Neill and with Helen Moss in Newell. So I'll pass you over to Sophie, who's going to talk a little bit about her work.
Thanks a million, Richard. I'll just get my slides up here. So good evening, everyone. It's a real privilege to be part of this wonderful event celebrating the fascinating relationship between music and the brain. I'm going to be speaking briefly about another facet of this relationship, the impact that music can have on our mental health. Following a short introduction to the field of music, health and well-being, I'm going to discuss the potential benefits that music can have for our mental health, looking at clinical and non-clinical populations. Next, I will touch on why music appears to benefit our health and well-being and mediate mental health recovery. Then to conclude, I will present the findings of a study investigating the impact of group singing on the well-being of people living with early stage dementia and their family carers, the subject of my doctoral research. Music is central to the human experience. Its relationship with health and well-being can be traced back nearly 40,000 years to the health and healing rituals of the Paleolithic era and is a recurring subject of discourse. We know, for example, that ancient Greek and Roman philosophers wrote and taught about the benefits of music for health, and that monastic medicine embodied a holistic attitude towards health back in the Middle Ages. However, it's only in the past few decades that substantial research into the benefits of music on health and well-being has been conducted. This body of research is now expanding rapidly. I've included images of 2 books here, which I would highly recommend. The first is by Daisy Fancourt, a pioneering researcher in this field, and looks at designing and researching arts and health interventions. The second is Musicophilia, a book by neurologist Oliver Sacks, in which he discusses a range of psychological and physiological conditions and their intriguing connections to music. Although very different, both publications capture the power of music and its ability to impact health and well-being. Mental health is increasingly viewed in terms of positive health, defined by Seligman as a state beyond the mere absence of disease, which is definable and measurable. This shifts focus away from symptoms and then towards ways that we can promote our well-being. There are a wide variety of musical experiences that we can engage in to support well-being. These experiences exist on a continuum of recreational to therapeutic opportunities and can be receptive or active in nature. Receptive experiences include music listening, which we've all been engaged in this evening, and music for relaxation, while active music making comprises experiences such as singing, playing instruments, and moving to music. These experiences can take place in a variety of different contexts and settings and may be chosen for different reasons. Considerable research into the potential benefits of music for mental health has been conducted. For example, studies have shown that active music making in a group can benefit the well-being of a wide variety of clinical populations, including people living with cancer, COPD, Parkinson's, dementia, postnatal depression, and other mental health conditions, as well as non-clinical populations. Looking first at group drumming, a study by Fancourt et al. Found that 10 weeks of group drumming can significantly improve depression, anxiety, and social resilience among mental health service users. Similarly, studies by Faulkner and Wood suggest that group drumming can positively impact the well-being of young people. Group singing is the common participatory form of music making used in research studies and in practice in the area of music and health. A randomized controlled trial by Colton et al. Reported that community group singing appears to have a significant effect on mental health-related quality of life, anxiety, and depression in older people. A qualitative study conducted by Fogg Rogers et al. Found that participating in a community music therapy choir helped people with Parkinson's disease and stroke to self-manage social isolation, communication difficulties, low mood, and other consequences of their condition. Similarly, a systematic review conducted by Lewis et al. Suggests that singing has the potential to improve health-related quality of life of people with respiratory diseases without causing significant side effects. So, why music? What is it about music that can support our well-being? In their book, Music, Health and Well-Being, MacDonald, Krutz and Mitchell suggest a number of possible reasons why music can produce these beneficial effects for health and well-being, and I've included a few here that I feel are pertinent to well-being. First, music is emotional. It has the capacity to affect our mood and emotions. It can relax us or excite us. It can make us feel happy or sad. It can also facilitate emotional release. Second, music is ubiquitous and easily accessible. Thanks to technology, we can now listen to our own music virtually anywhere. Music is also ambiguous in meaning. How we interpret a piece of music is influenced by our own listening histories, experiences, and preferences. Music is also distracting. It can allow us to escape from distressing aspects of our lives. Music is communicative. It provides a way to express and share emotions and ideas and build relationships, and it can transcend any language barrier. And lastly, music is inherently social, with numerous social functions. It brings people together. As part of my doctoral research, I explored how a community-based singing intervention impacts the well-being of people with early-stage dementia and their family carers. Dementia is a chronic disease syndrome and is characterized by deterioration in memory, thinking, behavior, and the ability to perform everyday activities. It has a physical, psychological, social, and economic impact, both on the person living with dementia themselves and on their family carers, and can negatively impact their well-being. 6 people with early-stage dementia were recruited through the memory clinic at Tala University Hospital and engaged in a 6-week group singing intervention with their family members from January to March last year. The hour-long singing sessions took place in a community arts centre 1 morning a week and were facilitated by a music therapist. Each singing session followed a flexible structure and included musical elements that promoted social connection, expression and creativity in the moment, reminiscence, and lifelong learning and cognitive stimulation. The facilitator adopted a person-centred approach, and participants played an active role, suggesting songs and music genres and engaging in songwriting together. Semi-structured interviews were conducted with the participants after the intervention, and interpretive phenomenological analysis revealed 4 subordinate themes: social connection, happiness and rejuvenation, reconnection with the self, and supporting the carer-cared-for relationship. I've included a participant quote here to help begin to illuminate each of these themes. One aspect of the theme of social connection which emerged really strongly was a feeling of belonging. A participant with dementia said, "Because you know that the person over there has the same sort of problems I have, and the person sitting beside you, you can talk about it." The participants recurrently reported that the singing sessions made them feel good. The sessions were associated with happiness, joy, and a sense of being uplifted. In the words of one participant with dementia, "She could have walked the whole way home. She was very happy when she left it anyways. You feel contented within yourself, like Betty and I did. Sing along in a group, it's terrific." The participants also appeared to value the opportunity to exert agency and make useful contributions, which stimulated reconnection with their sense of self. "I enjoyed taking part, really having some input into the situation." Participants also spoke about their adjusting to life with dementia and the changing relationship dynamics. Participants saw the singing sessions as good opportunities to spend meaningful one-to-one time with their family member, where their roles were incidental and could be forgotten. It was an hour where we got to do something together once a week. From this study, we concluded that the evidence of multidimensional enhancement of well-being, absence of adverse effects, and accessibility of this musical medium support the increased provision of community-based singing groups for these populations. Full details can be found using the reference below. Music arguably ranks among the most powerful and diverse sensory, motor, cognitive, and emotional experiences for the brain. As you can see on the fMRI images here, Music activates extremely complex and widespread bilateral networks of cortical and subcortical areas in the human brain. Exploring how it can be harnessed to benefit our mental health is a burgeoning area of research and one that I'm excited to be involved in. Thank you so much for listening.
That was brilliant. Thanks, Sophie. It's really fantastic work that you've been doing with your patients and your groups. So at this point, we're going to change to a little bit of a Q&A for the remainder of the event. So we'll spend maybe 10, 15 minutes taking questions, and we've already got a couple of good questions coming in from the chat. But if you have questions for Sophie or for Svetlana or for Fiona, please type them into the chat and I'll do my best to stay on top of them all. So what I might do now is ask our speakers, so Svetlana, Fiona, Sophie and myself, to turn on your cameras, and if other people have questions, please pop them into the chat. Our first question is from Anya, who's asking a question for Fiona. So Fiona, thanks for joining us and thanks for your talk earlier. Anya's wondering about smell-based or taste-based forms of synesthesia, particularly ones that can trigger visual perceptions. And if there have been cases of anosmia or people who have lost their sense of taste or smell, maybe in response to COVID, and has that had an impact on their synesthetic perceptions?
Okay, that's a great question. We don't have any data on synesthetes specifically that have had anosmia or even impaired taste or smell, even dysgeusia or agusia or any of those other conditions. And in fact, we know very little about those conditions, even in the general population in relation to COVID-19. So understanding what it means for synesthetes will probably happen once we get a good grounding for for how anosmia, how dysgeusia and agusia pan out over COVID now as a consequence of having COVID-19. So it's a great question. The prevalence of smell and taste related synesthesia is much lower than it would be for any visual based or auditory based types of synesthesia. So finding participants with that type of synesthesia is going to be difficult anyway. But I think it's a great idea to look to see whether or not there are synesthetic experiences that might be smell related or taste related, whether they're affected by the sensory capacity of their taste system or their smell system. Anyway, I think that's a great question. I hope we'll be able to do something to address that, in the future. But as I said, we rarely come across synesthetes that have just pure taste or pure smell synesthesia. Sometimes when they have taste or smell, it's mixed up with other more dominant types of synesthesia, like seeing colors to letters or seeing colors and shapes to music, like Svetlana showed us earlier. So great question. We just need the opportunity to be able to directly address it.
Just on that, what's the most what's the most unusual type of synesthesia you've encountered or you've worked with?
Well, I've been once told that by a synesthete that they couldn't work with me because my name gave them a bad taste, literally, and synesthetically. So that was that was funny. We had a good laugh over that. But I did hear from one of my colleagues in the UK about a synesthete who had to break up with his girlfriend because the perfume that she was wearing generated very bizarre experiences for him, and it just was a bit too overwhelming. So he had to end the relationship. So you do hear about things like this, as you speak to synesthetes. But the most unusual one, generally, we generally have graphene color synesthetes. It seems to be the most reported type and the most common type. But every now and then we do get some interesting ones. Yeah.
I've heard of one person who experiences smells as high-pitched sounds, which is fascinating.
Yeah, exactly.
So, those overlaps between the non kind of typical senses where it doesn't just involve colors or sounds can be very interesting.
Yeah, and actually you've published on unusual cases of synesthesia. You had that case of the person who was accident prone, right, and became a synesthete. Maybe you could tell everybody about that one, because I find that case really fascinating.
Yeah, it was very serendipitous that we encountered this person. It was a friend of one of my undergrad students who she had two rare types of synesthesia where she would first of all see colors in response to music, and she was a musician herself. So similar to Svetlana, she would see colors in front of her. And she would also see auras, colored auras around people. So yeah, different people would have different colors in her mind's eye. And sometimes, similar to what you were saying about that person who broke up with their girlfriend, she maintained that she could predict which couples would stay together based on the complementarity of their colors, which was quite fascinating. But yeah, she was very unfortunate and accident prone, where she suffered viral meningitis and a series of concussions, 4 in all. 2 of them were quite bad. And all of those experiences and the medications she took afterwards resulted in alterations to the nature of her synesthesia. So the colors changed, or they were a little bit off, or they moved in her visual field. And just as she was recovering and they were coming back to normal, she was hit by lightning in a crazy accident where she was in a porta cabin, and she had her hand on the windowsill, and the structure was hit by lightning and blasted her across the floor. So after that, her synesthesia vanished. It was gone for several months. But when it came back, she was very meticulous. She had recorded the different colors in response to the different musical notes before any of these events. And when her synesthesia returned, there was a very high similarity in the mapping of colors to the particular musical notes. And it was such a rare case that we, through Kevin Mitchell, actually, we encountered a second guy who had the same 2 forms of synesthesia. And he also lost them, but he lost them for 11 years when he was on anti-anxiety medication for severe social anxiety. And when he went off the meds, again, they returned. And again, there was a really high overlap or similarity to how they were before. So those were, yeah, definitely 2 very rare and very interesting cases. And remarkable, we should find them both in and around the Dublin area, which was quite, the odds on that must be quite low.
Fascinating.
Yeah, I have another question for you from Stephen, who's asking about the genes that have been associated with synesthesia, and are there specific ones, I'd imagine, is the question.
So this has been like the search for the Holy Grail, looking for the gene. And the short answer is that there isn't a single gene identified yet, although there have been a few labs that have been looking for the genetic profile of synesthetes. There has been some suggestion that maybe chromosome 16 carries some interesting genetic identity markers there for synesthesia, but again, it's not clear if that describes all types of synesthesia. And so the quick answer is that no, but there's so many clues there, that it is highly heritable, it's autosomal. There used to be thinking in the field that it was more likely that if you're female, you're more likely to be a synesthete than if you're male. But that myth has been debunked recently by carefully controlled experiments that you're both males and females are equally likely to be synesthetes. So yeah, nobody's really identified the genes specifically yet.
Yeah, tricky question to answer, I think. A quick question for Svetlana, and this is from Sophie. Does your synesthesia play a role when you're memorizing music? Do you find it has a role there? You're on mute.
Unmute.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Sophie. Yes. Okay. First of all, so I do have photographic memory. It's so it was very helpful actually for pre-recorded Saturday performance on music consciousness, because literally it's like a blink in virtual reality when you overlap. So it's like I had to keep in my visual memory like from 4 to 6 bars till the page turn. Okay, so as well as it says that you see, I'm very sensitive to overtones. It's a partial tones on the main pitch. Okay, and I think this overtones mist generates or somehow connected with visual imagery. So because I had experience when the piano was adjusted to pure pitch, like very hardly, so the overtones were lost, I actually had difficulty to reproduce my memory to do a normal performance. As well as it's interesting, I experienced it, so it was actually exhibition in Trinity College Dublin from MMT, course Music Technology. And one of the students, he did microtones. And so when I hear this pitch 1/4 or 1/8, so it's graphically, so on the graphically creates different dimension, if it's possible to describe like this. So, and yes, it is sometimes I base my structural memory on this kind of graphics, so, or shapes, I suppose. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Svetlana. Another one for Fiona. Fiona, I think you're going to be in demand for a lot of these questions. So the question from Roisin is there an overlap between sensory processing disorder and synesthesia? And actually, I might throw in a second one just while they're both quite short. The second one, is there research on whether graphene color synesthesia may help or hinder children learning to read?
Okay, so the first one, there isn't really that much research on sensory processing disorders and synesthesia, to be honest. So we don't really know whether or not there's an overlap. Having said that, though, given the prevalence of synesthesia, it's unlikely that there is an overlap, in my opinion. And given the research that we've already been conducting on synesthesia, it's really unlikely that synesthesia is associated with any impairment of processing sensory information. In fact, what we think is happening is that synesthesia almost augments the processing of sensory information. So that would be my hunch, but we don't have any data on that yet. And then the second question about whether synesthesia can help or hinder children. So again, there isn't too much on trying to figure out whether or not there's a boost in reading in synesthete children versus non-synesthetes. There's a big study being conducted in the UK at the moment, headed by Julia Simner, on synesthesia during childhood. And as far as I'm aware, she hasn't found any evidence to suggest that it's in any way a hindrance to reading. But what I might add there is that I think part of our goal in doing public events like this is to make synesthesia become more, to make people become more aware of synesthesia. And the reason why is then if a child who's in the classroom says to their teacher, why do you write the letter A in white? Everyone knows the letter A is red, that the teacher will understand what that means, because there may be anxiety evoked by a child who's expressing their synesthesia, and that in itself might hinder learning experience of anything. So the more widely known synesthesia is, I think the better it will be for everybody. And also I think that we could then maybe find educational ways, pedagogical tools that can take on board synesthetic experiences to try and enhance that learning experience for children. And I think then we might very well find that synesthesia does enhance reading in children. But that experiment has yet to be done, and there's still a lot of work to be done to make synesthesia as a condition a lot more aware, and to debunk myths such as that it's got anything to do with medical related conditions, etc. All the research that I'm doing suggests that synesthesia actually enhances cognition and learning rather than the other way around. So I hope that addresses any questions.
Yeah, that's perfect.
Thank you so much, Fiona. Yes, I work in education, and thank you for mentioning this, because I do use lessons from musical space synesthesia with my students on visualization, and it just brings effortless technique and saves many hours of practice when they actually balance the perception on visualization of effort, the interval of distance, for piano technique intervals and whatever, and they're able to do that without struggle. And so it is that we have very important lessons in the research on synesthesia. Thank you.
Thanks, Svetlana. We've just time maybe for 2 more questions. So the first one is from Matt, and it's for Svetlana. Do you have perfect pitch? And if so, does the pitch that you hear in everyday life, like the kettle or alarms, does that trigger your synesthesia?
Okay, thank you. Okay, I tell you that, so I have a perfect pitch for piano. It's not really perfect, but any piano I will recognize and I will give you absolute pitch. But on the other sounds, not. But my student, who is chromesthetic synesthete, Tim Doyle, violinist, he actually does colors to the pitch. And if he hears any noise, he can say that, so what color it is, and he will recognize it even by a color. It gives him more definition what the pitch was. So
thanks for that. That's really remarkable, but it's amazing. You hear stories about synesthetes who experience colors when they hear rain or they hear dogs barking or other kind of naturalistic sounds, and it's really fascinating. Okay, we'll have one more question because I know people need to get back to their evening. It's been a lovely event and I'm really enjoying it, but I don't want to keep people here all night. So I have one more, and apologies if I didn't get to your question, but one from Patricia, who's asking, in the case of visual or hearing impaired, is synesthesia more likely or more pronounced? That's for Fiona again.
Okay, I can answer that really quickly. And it seems that if you lose hearing or vision, that seems to be associated, at least through reports, of weakening of the synesthetic experience. So, for example, we've studied older people where hearing is declining, and they report that the synesthesia that they have experienced just is starting to fade, and it seems to fade in a correlated way with their decline in sensory processing. So yeah, there's an interesting link there that we could probably do a bit more research on.
That's great, thanks Fiona. And actually, before we finish, I'm going to very quickly take advantage of the fact that I can ask one more question before we finish. It's actually for Sophie. Have any of the participants in your studies mentioned that they're experiencing colours in response to the music, or have you come across any synesthetes in your work?
That's a really interesting question, and I haven't asked. So it's one of these things that I guess in my area of research isn't something that might spring to mind straight away, but a hugely interesting thing. So it's something I'll definitely consider adding in for future studies with those populations.
It's a funny one, because often people don't know that synesthesia is unusual until they hear about it. And I never heard about it until I was 17 or 18 in college. And until then, I just thought everyone experienced Wednesday as yellow. So often people can be, surprised when they discover there is synesthete and there's a name for how they experience the world.
Yeah, exactly. I've had it on a couple of occasions in teaching or at a synesthesia event we ran a couple of years ago, where everyone just presumed that was normal, and we're having sort of arguments in there being like, no, but everyone the music clearly has colors associated with it, and yes, when I play A it is red, and all of these different things. So it's fascinating to discover all these different things about it.
Yeah, hopefully maybe someone out there tonight attending the event might have discovered that they have synesthesia if they didn't know before. So thanks everybody for taking part tonight. Thanks everyone for attending. I think we'll finish up now before we reach past. So I want to give a huge thank you to all our presenters and performers tonight. So to Svetlana, to Fiona, and to Sophie for your talks and your performances and your fielding of the questions. Thanks to everyone for attending. Enormous thanks to Claire for overseeing the technical side of switching between videos and different media very effortlessly. And thank you everybody for attending tonight. If you enjoyed it, there will be another event on Saturday evening, which will also deal with music consciousness, so you can find that on Eventbrite. I wish everyone a lovely evening. Please enjoy the rest of Brain Awareness Week, and I'll see you all again soon. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Richard.
Thank you.